I really appreciate the work you've done in New Jersey for Sibling Bill of Rights, because, you know, it's just critical. And like thinking, well, I'm sure I'll talk more on that too, but reflecting on what you just shared and speaking on it, you know, child welfare is very unique. When you grow up in the system, you really have an abstract reality to what the norm is. Like, if there's a bell curve, we're not in the center of it, for sure. And, you know, you grow up with different families, grow up with different religions, you grow up with different ideologies around you. And one constant that I think is so critical to preserve is siblings, because at least there's a commonality, there's a shared, hey, you know, we're going through this together. And, you know, I have a bunch of siblings, and to be honest, it was one of those, that's a spot where I think didn't go well. I spent the majority of my time in care with one of my half sisters, but I have several little brothers that to this day we're all spread out. And now, you know, I'm like 30, so they're not little anymore. But even still, it's like, man, we all grew up apart from each other, and so even coming together now as adults, it has its very unique challenges, and it's a way that I look at, hey, you know, the system that I grew up in had imperfections. The system today has imperfections. What we can do right by those who are going into it today to fill up, hey, these didn't work out in the past. How do we make sure that the next generation doesn't have those imperfections?
And I think you touched on something so important, and I hate hearing that you weren't able to be placed with all of your siblings. And so myself and a group of about 11 other young individuals in the state of New Jersey, we served on the Department of Children and Families Youth Council, and we broke off into different subcommittees based on our passions, right? If we can change the system, or if there was one thing that we could change, what would that be? What would that look like? So the number of us that were on the Sibling Bill of Rights subcommittee, a lot of stories where I don't know where my little sister is, I don't know where my little brother is, I was adopted, they're still in foster care. There were so many of these stories, and I was able to just sit there and take a bit of a seat back, because in that space, I had a different experience because I was able to be placed with my siblings. So at that moment, that was the time for me to give my peers the space to express what they were going through and what that was like, because I couldn't speak to that. But I knew that it was rooted in so much passion and so much conviction, because I know what it felt like to be able to wake up next to my siblings and say, you know what, even though this is a lot, we're going through it together. And I think that's really why I championed the Sibling Bill of Rights as well, because there should be no situation where young people are entering the child welfare system and they're saying they missed their brother's graduation because their social worker told them that they did not deserve to go there, or they could not call their sibling because maybe they didn't go to school that day and they're listing that as bad behaviors. That is not how you treat people or human beings at all. Like, yes, we go through different things, and a lot of the times things that they're disciplining are just our reactions to what we're dealing with and our own way of masking our traumas. That is our outlet. So to take away something so important, such as a visitation or a phone call or going to a graduation or a birthday, I think is absurd. And to be in 2026 and to still be having these conversations, and I know that there's many states that are looking at their youth bill of rights and trying to like revise them or trying to create sibling bill of rights, and it's important work that is being done. So I'm glad that we're a part of that conversation and a part of that shift as well, to improve the child welfare system for many generations of young people that unfortunately will have to face that one day.
All day, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I guess to build on that, you know, one unique experience I can share is, so, you know, I of course grew up in the system. That was a huge part of, you know, my younger self's identity, and still certainly is a piece of the story, because again, even watching stuff like this, it's like crazy memories pop up in your head. Like, I was just talking to Zion, we were probably interrupting the movie a little bit, we were whispering, when they mentioned like, hey, I was afraid to, or I was reserved in telling people that I'm in foster care. I had a funny experience on that, and I'm a humorous person. I feel like humor is a way of surviving. It's the way I've survived. And when I was in like 3rd grade, and then I'll get to the main point, but this is funny. I think it's funny. You guys might be like, whoa. I just thought everyone was in foster care.
And so I remember being in like, class, like, oh, so who's your social worker? They're like, what are you talking about? I remember getting pulled aside because they were like, hey, you can't be telling people that. I'm like, telling people what? Like, it was no different to me than talking about what your favorite crayon was. And that was a bit of a shock when I realized, oh, wow, there was a moment in my life later on, in like middle school, I went to one of my, to this day, still good friend's house. And I literally thought that they were acting, because like no one's fighting, no one's throwing stuff, there's nothing dirty, they must have cleaned before I came. It's like, no, that's just how it is. People, there's a normal, quote unquote, attempt to have normalcy in life.